Pietrangelo is a Golden Knight, and now they're deadlocked with the Avs for the team that's going to win the Cup. Welcome. It's Tuesday afternoon, and this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, powered by SportsBettingDime.com. Good afternoon. I'm Bob Duff, as always, joined by my co-host Kevin Allen. Of course, this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, powered by SportsBettingDime.com, your leading source for odds, sports news, and game predictions. If you're looking to find out who's going to win the Stanley Cup, they already have those odds up in their NHL tracker, so take a look. And you go there and you'll find anything you want to bet on in the NHL. They cover it at sportsbettingdime.com. We'll talk about some of those odds here today, and we will send you a link in our description so you can check them out for yourself. Kevin, why don't you introduce today's guest?
Yeah, Bob. Our guest is Adrian Dater of ColoradoHockeyNow.com, and he's a longtime beat writer for the for the Colorado Avalanche. And of course, as Bob alluded to, the Colorado Avalanche came out as the betting favorite to win in next year's Stanley Cup. And now that Pietrangelo has gone to the Golden Knights, it's now neck and neck for those two. But I wanted to talk to Adrian about Joe Sakic's performance in this offseason. I absolutely loved the Devon Toews trade. I've been a big fan of his. I think he's an underrated defenseman. He's sort of the prototype for the modern defenseman for today's game. The quick-paced game, that quick first pass, getting the puck out of the zone, and more importantly, getting it to the skilled players at the right time. And what we know about the Colorado Avalanche is they have skilled players up front. And they've got Makar, the young defenseman, who's already in my mind one of the better defensemen in the league. Now they've added Toews, who's going to add a second great passer in that unit. So let's start there, Adrian. When you add in Toews, you add in Saad, how do you think Joe Sakic performed in this offseason?
Well, my headline on my site, thanks for having me, guys, was Trader Joe strikes again. So I think that's I think that says some of it. How I feel. I'm not the biggest expert in the world on Devon Toews. I have enough trouble keeping up with my own team, having to scout 30 other teams. But obviously I've seen him play, and it looks like a hell of a pickup. I mean, I think the biggest tell on this trade that it was a win for the Avs was Lou Lamoriello coming right out and saying on his conference call yesterday, like, "Hey, look, I got to be honest here. This was a cap crunch problem dump. We had to make a tough choice here, and I wouldn't have done it otherwise," he said, in any normal year. But he had to make a tough decision. He got 2 second-round picks for that. You never know what those picks will be. It could be a win for Lou in the long run. You never know. This was a kind of came out of nowhere that the Avs would be able to get a guy like him. Most people thought that it would be a veteran right shot D, kind of Travis Hamonic type of guy that's sitting out there still on the market, and sixth defenseman kind of guy. Let's just bury him back there and hopefully he doesn't do us too much harm. Instead, they get a young, seemingly guy on the ascension in his career, 25 years old, who had a really good year for the Islanders, played every single game, every playoff game for a team that made the Eastern Finals, probably at a pretty good cap number they're going to get him to a multi-year deal. So it's hard not to call it a win for Joe there, and he made another deal on Saturday getting Saad, so he's still got a little bit of cap room too. So it's looking good here in Denver. It hasn't been good for many years. The last couple have been good theoretically, but we had a long stretch in the desert after all that initial success here as a franchise. Now it's back to being all guns blazing again here.
If I can follow up, I just wanted to ask you, I'm just about to the end of a column that I'm about to post, comparing Yzerman and Joe Sakic. I mean, obviously, when they played, they were both superior centermen, and neither one of them were good talking about themselves. They had a lot of similarities in that regard. And I think their style of general managing is very similar. Neither one of them goes for the splashy move. They're slow, patient, steady on the wheel type guys, looking ahead, always on the prize. And I think it's going to pay off for them, for both of them. Yzerman didn't win a cup in Tampa Bay, but he set up, obviously, that team that won that cup. And Sakic now seems on the verge of having this team. It's taken a while, but slow and steady, and he's gotten this team in position at least to win it.
It's so funny, isn't it? The similarities between Yzerman and Sakic. I mean, it's a great column idea. I should do it too. We've done stories about how they were similar as players. Both wore number 19.
Right.
Both played for the same organizations their entire careers. Both Hall of Famers. Both won multiple cups. Canadian icons. And they've looked a lot very similar as GMs. They're the same guy. They're very low key. They don't want a lot of attention on themselves, really. But they just work hard at it. Sakic started out, don't forget, as a GM in name, but don't forget he started out with Patrick Waugh as his coach, and Waugh also had the title of I think it was director of hockey operations, something like that.
Right.
Vice president of hockey operations, something like that. And basically, he didn't have full control, I don't think. Patrick was Patrick. Patrick's going to want to be in control wherever he is. And I always thought that was not going to be a marriage that lasted too long, and it didn't. Now he's got everything in more of his control, and he's doing things his way. Patrick, don't forget, he wanted to sign guys like Radulov and a lot of big-name free agents because he was also the coach of the team. He wanted to win right away.
Right.
Sakic's been more patient, doing things better, the longer-term way, the longer play way. So, the long game. So I think, very apt observation about how similar they've been. And, I assume Steve Yzerman is going to turn that Red Wing team around sooner rather than later with him in charge.
And since Kevin's stealing all my questions, I'll try to go at a different tack with the Sakic-Yzerman parallels. I first met Joe when he was a 16-year-old playing for the Swift Current Broncos. So
Wow.
I don't go back a long way with him, but he never really, he loved to talk about hockey. But like Kevin said, these are two guys that really, Yzerman and Sakic, don't do it for the glory. They really aren't seeking attention on themselves. I remember Pat Quinn telling me at the 2002 Olympics, he thought the key for Canada's gold medal win was he wanted everyone to play shorter shifts. And he knew if the big name guys didn't buy in, it would never work. And he said Sakic, Yzerman, and Mario Lemieux just went whole hog on the idea, thought it was great, pick up the pace, let's go fast. And he said once they did it, everybody was going to do it because those guys carried so much respect in the room. And I think that's still the case. Even guys, young guys, I'm sure on the Avalanche, and you see it with the young guys on the Wings, even though they probably don't remember specifically seeing those guys play because they're too young, they understand and recognize the kind of gravitas they both carry in the game.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not? I mean, both scored over 600 goals. It really is amazing how similar they were. Sakic, don't be too, overblown by his modesty, though. He has an ego. I mean, he knows what's being written about him, though, and he wants some glory. He wants the glory, but he doesn't want to brag about it. He's never going to brag about anything. He's always going to be humble Joe. Excuse me, Willett. But he wants to he wants to win a cup very badly as a GM. I think that's important to him now. I'm not sure he was quite as like I said with the Waugh situation, and he probably got the job a little soon, even though he spent a couple years in Pierre Lacroix's front office and kind of learned the ropes, quote unquote. I don't think he was ever really. I don't know if he ever had his full Joe Sakic drive in him as a GM when he first started. I think he was a little overwhelmed at first. Now I think he's got the hang of it. Now he wants to win a Stanley Cup bad. That would be an ultimate legacy for him to have that cup as a GM too, after a player and all the success he's had, the gold medal, cups, whatnot. Yeah, that's the final cherry on top for him and Yzerman.
Yeah, Adrian, after the season, I think, the read on Colorado from the outside was, maybe they should go and try to upgrade their goaltending. But Joe gave them a vote of confidence, and still there was speculation they might look at goaltending. They didn't do that, but you've covered the team a long time. What is your read on the goaltending? Do you think it's good enough?
Well, I think it's good enough with that roster, and if that roster stays healthy and plays well. That's a sort of backhand compliment for what I think of the goaltending. I am a little bit skeptical still about the goaltending. That's still going to be the question mark with this team moving forward. That's what everybody's going to talk about until the playoffs, until these guys prove them wrong. Grubauer is an interesting guy. He's German. He's very sort of into his own little world a little bit in the locker room. He's a goalie. They're all like that, right? Most of them. But he's very smarter than your average bear. I wonder if he sort of thinks too much at times, though, as a goalie. Like, you can't think too much, I don't think, as a goalie. That said, he's won 2 playoff rounds with this team. No goalie had done that since Jose Theodore, I don't think, for this team, like 10 years before. And 15 years before. Where did the time go? So he's had health issues. And that's always going to be a thing for us media people to pick apart too. He can't stay healthy. He's injury prone. He looked like a groin game 1 of the Stars series. Second lower body injury, just like that this season. So that's 2 in 1 year. Now you're going to worry about that. Even if he's healthy, is he good enough to win a cup? So many guys weren't good enough until they won a cup. So I don't really buy that argument so much as the fact that I just worry more about Grubauer's health a little bit about his mental capacity. I'm not saying he's dumb or anything. I'm saying he may think too much for his own good. Francouz, they say he was hurt in the playoffs. I guess I'll go along with that. It sure seemed awfully convenient that he was sidelined all of a sudden after having just some brutal games in the playoffs. Now, of course, they're going to say, yeah, the injuries caused it, but he was out there. I don't know. I'm not an excuse maker. He looked awful in the playoffs, and I think he cost them that series against Dallas. I think if they get any kind of normal goaltending at all, they win that series in a breeze. So the goaltending is the issue. I thought for a second they might make a bid on Markstrom, but they wanted another forward, they wanted another D, and they just kind of ran out of money, I think, on goaltending. And now they're going to say, look, what are the odds that these guys are going to get hurt at the same time again? The odds are with us. They're both good enough. We got a combined cap hit of $5.2 million for these 2 guys for next season. We're going to move forward with what we got until further notice.
One of the things that they've kind of quietly done the last couple of years, people talk about Colorado's youth, but you look at some of the guys they brought in, Burakovsky, Donskoy, Bellemare, and then Ed Sod. They're bringing in guys that have either played in the finals or won a cup. And when you do talk about it, is a young nucleus in a lot of ways with this team. And you think having those guys around that have kind of been on the journey makes a difference?
I know that's really popular to think and say. I think it does in some situation. The word, I don't know if Bellemare going to one finals is going to matter a whole lot to other guys in the room so much. You guys know players don't sit around and query other guys so much about their, hey, can you tell me what it's like to be in the Cup Finals? Boy, I'd really love to know. Oh wow, they know what it's probably going to be like. It's all about the talent, the goaltending, injuries in the playoff. Sure, I think it's nice to have a guy who can give a nice speech saying, "Hey boys, I remember when we were down, 3-2 to the, Capitals one year, and we beat him in Game 7." That kind of thing. Like, I think Burakovsky did that, right? Against the Lightning, excuse me. That's fine. I mean, Grubauer actually has a cup ring. People forget that. Philip Grubauer has a Stanley Cup ring. Of course, he lost his starting job in the playoffs 2 games in to Braden Holtby. Never played again, but that's another subject.
Well, that's a great note to end it on, Adrian. Adrian, we appreciate having you on here. It's you've offered some good insight on the Colorado Avalanche, the team that a lot of people think is going to win it next season. And obviously, they were injured, beat up in this playoffs, and they weren't quite ready. So, thanks for joining us. We look forward to having you on again.
Hey, it was great to be on with these two Hall of Fame journalists.
One
thank
Hall.
you very much.
Yeah.
One Hall of Fame. Oh, you're still not in, Bob?
No.
Oh, you'll get in, I'm sure. But you should be. Sorry, I thought you were in still. I thought you had a green jacket.
All right. Thanks.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
See you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. That was Adrian Dater of Colorado Hockey Now, and it's interesting. He's right. We all talk as if it's magic dust when you bring in people that have won the cup before, but he's right when he says the players do not sit around, saying to their guy in the next cubicle, "Hey, what's it like to be in the finals?" That's just not what they do. Now it does come in handy and when things get a little tight and people can come back with stories about what happens. But saying all that, I thought it was a good acquisition. Saad, having won twice, having been in the same division, knowing the teams in the West extremely well, he's been around the block a little bit. So I really appreciated what Joe Sakic has done this summer, Bob.
And I do have a bit of a background with Philip Grubauer, too, because he was on Windsor's second of their back-to-back Memorial Cup teams. And they brought him in from Belleville at the trade deadline because they thought they needed an upgrade in their goaltending. And I got to admit, like Adrian, I kind of watched how he doesn't carry himself with a swagger. He's not a guy that really says a whole lot or boasts much or really gives off an impression of confidence outwardly. But when they needed him in that playoffs, they got down 3-0 to Kitchener in the Eastern Final, and he rattled off 4 wins in a row, and they won that series, and they didn't lose another game. They swept Barrie, a team that had Alex Pietrangelo, by the way, in the final, and then won the Memorial Cup without losing a game in the entire tournament, and he was in goal for all of them. So he doesn't give you there's some goalies like Patrick Waugh, obviously the ultra male example, I guess, of the swagger, but he doesn't give off that swagger, but he's delivered the goods at other levels. So it's kind of hard to doubt the guy until he fails. I mean, he failed this year, I guess, because he got hurt, but he didn't fail because he didn't win.
Well, it'd be interesting too. I think Joe Sakic will have another kick at that goal he can, and by that I mean at the trade deadline. So many goalies changed teams this time around. That I think, not everybody, historically, the playoff pool changes by 4 or 5 or 6 teams every year. And there's always a surprise team that you don't count on that, didn't get in, didn't perform at the level they want. And, for example, if New Jersey just has another bad year, will they consider at the trade deadline to move Corey Crawford? A player that I heard that the Colorado might be interested in had they gone after a goalie. If Washington suddenly just fell out of it, would Lundqvist be available at the trade deadline? So I think Sakic will be able to evaluate his goaltending come trade deadline and have another. There'll be somebody out there that if he feels like he needs to do something, he'll do it again. So it was almost a pretty smart thing. I think I like these 2 acquisitions better than I would have liked it had he, went and got Crawford, for example, or somebody else that had some success before. So this is this wasn't his only opportunity to upgrade his goaltending.
It kind of reminds you of the 97, 98 Red Wings when all year long all we talked about was, is Chris Osgood good enough to win a? And, as Adrian said, until they got injuries, Grubauer was looking pretty good behind that team.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And it is interesting, too. You brought it up before the show started, but it's worth talking about it. It really speaks to how tight the NHL is, from 1 to 16, and particularly at the top. So Colorado, everybody loves them. They're the team to beat. And then Vegas signs Pietrangelo, but they got to give up Nate Schmidt to do that. So they don't get the full value of Pietrangelo because, boy, if you would have added Pietrangelo to that defense that had Nate Schmidt on it, but now he's gone. So how much did you really improve that Vegas lineup? I mean, you did. I'd rather have Pietrangelo than Nate Schmidt, but I really like Nate Schmidt. I think Nate Schmidt's a valuable defenseman. I think he fits well the way the game is played now. He can move the puck. He's pretty good defensively. He's been around the block a little bit. So that to me, that was some kind of a bizarre move for them. I just don't know if it's worth the consternation to add Pietrangelo if you've got to give up Nate Schmidt to do it. Now, I can't argue that they're better. But I wonder how all the teammates feel about that. And I wonder if Pietrangelo gave that any thought. He's going to a team, he went from a team where he was the guy and all of his teammates are trying to convince him to stay. And now he goes to a team where, they've got a little friction because they didn't handle Marc-Andre Fleury right. And I'm sure not everybody loved the fact that Nate Schmidt had to be sacrificed in order for Pietrangelo to show up there. Your thoughts on that, Bob?
Well, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, I'm a fan of Alex Pietrangelo. I think he's a very, very good defenseman. I'd put him in the top 10 in the league, but I don't know if I'd put him in the top 4. I mean, no. He's not going to be – I don't know that he's – I'd say his window to win a Norris is probably gone by now. He's 30 years old, and I don't know. He could still surprise us. I mean, sometimes these things take a while to win, but what worries me even more about that, I think – I agree with you that moving Nate Schmidt, have they significantly improved? Well, the odds makers think so because now Colorado and Vegas are the plus 750 favorites to win the Stanley Cup in the sportsbettingdime.com Stanley Cup tracker. So the odds makers certainly think they made an improvement, and they certainly got the best guy who was available in the free agent pool. But so did Toronto a couple of years ago when they got John Tavares, and they're not having any Stanley Cup parade yet.
Yeah. Well, Pietrangelo is 6'4", so he's got size. Nate Schmidt's not big. He's good offensively and defensively, but he's not a dynamic offensive player. You know what I mean? Like he is, he's not dazzling, but he's very good. I mean, as you just said, he's a top 10 defenseman. So, there is a lot to be like. Now, let me ask you this. The identity of the Vegas Golden Knights coming out of the gate that first year, Gerard Gallant is their coach. We're a bunch of misfits. Nobody wanted us. We've come together. Now that team is starting to look like more of a superstar team. Stone, top premium player, $9 million a year, I think, something like that. Pietrangelo, they're paying him pretty darn well. Are they losing their identity a little bit?
Well, I think they're trying to change it because that identity, has gotten them so far, but it hasn't gotten them over the hump yet. And maybe the thing is, it's great to have that collective and the all for one and one for all. It's kind of the old Jacques Demers style of coaching, but you still need, I think, that at least one superstar player to get you to the promised land. I mean, even when Demers finally won in Montreal, he had Patrick Roy in goal, so he had a superstar player. He had Detroit, he had Yzerman, but it was a young Yzerman who was still learning the ways of the game. So you can't compare that to the Yzerman that later won cups in Detroit. I think the thing that is just puzzling to me and almost baffling about Vegas is the way they operate. You don't expect an expansion team to operate it that way, but they're trading draft picks to bring in talent to try to win now. And usually when you're an expansion team, you're trading talent to build draft picks so you can have a future. But you wonder, what's that team going to look like in 2 or 3 years? They've made all these moves to try to win now. Are they going to, if they don't get there, are they going to regret this in 2 or 3 years?
Well, Cody Glass better be pretty darn good, I guess, is what I would say, about that. But it does seem, they're being a bit impatient. Here I talked about how patient, steady on the wheel Sakic and Yzerman are, and here you have Kelly McCrimmon, their GM, who, this team has barely got here, and they're so impatient, like, well, that didn't work. Well, what didn't work? There are teams that haven't won in this league since 1967. We don't know whether the all for one concept will work. You haven't been in the league long enough to know whether it really works or not. But saying all that, I'm being devil's advocate here because I understand completely going after Pietrangelo. I share your the accolades you used to discuss him. I think he was the prize. This is a guy. How many guys do we have on the defensive side of the puck who are known to be all-around players? And not as many as you would think. I mean, you're either almost a stay-at-home guy or you're a puck mover. The guys that can do a little bit of everything, seem to be in short supply, especially guys who shoot from the right side. I like the move. I just think I was shocked. Like, had they made that move and did what I thought they were going to do, which is trade Alec Martinez, who they just got, last year and is in the last year of his contract, and they might not be able to sign him, I would have thought, okay, well, that makes sense. I would have just been totally on board with this. Now, I am on board with the move because they are a better team, but I think it's a little less enticing that they had to give up Nate Schmidt. So,
kind of an interesting subtext to all that when Kelly McCrimmon did speak to the media after all the moves had been made. One of the things he said is they're not trading Marc-Andre Fleury. He's staying put, so they're going to pay him that $7 million a year to be their backup goalie. And he said they would share the net. Him and Robin Leonard being the two. And Leonard, we found out also from that Zoom call, is going to undergo shoulder surgery. Now they don't think he'll miss any time, but I mean, who can say? Because we don't know when the season's going to start.
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but I think you hear an undercurrent that the Golden Knights screwed that up in two fronts. They screwed it up in terms of how they handled it, and it's surprising on a George McPhee team. I've known George McPhee a long time. I don't think it would have gone like this had George still been in the driving the bus. Now, I don't want to criticize Kelly McCrimmon because he was always very popular when he was in the Western Hockey League, and I don't know all that went on. So, but from what I'm hearing, that Marc-Andre Fleury was a little offended by how this all came down, and maybe this is just a natural occurrence of a top player who doesn't like losing his job in this manner, but seemed like it was more than that. I know Andre Fleury as well. He's known as a really, really high respect guy. And I don't think he liked all that. But the other element that I'm hearing, and this is one that surprises me, is that a lot of GMs didn't like how the Golden Knights handled their trades. They were active with a lot of teams, and a lot of teams had the impression they were farther along on deals than they really were, and they thought that maybe they didn't do a good job of communicating. As I guess is the polite way to say it. Some people might just say that they felt like they were led astray. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Glenn Sather, when he was in a GM, not everybody loved him either because he liked to win every deal. So, where I think in today's world, there's probably some of this going on too, where you want to win the trade, but you want the other guy to look good because it's not in your best interest to have the other GM look like he just got beat up, or you're not going to be able to get trades again. So, you're always trying to make a deal that'll help the other guy a little bit too, even though you want it to help your team more.
I just wondered too if there's not an element of they're trying to put a happy face on, as you say, a situation they really screwed up, and maybe the problem was when they went to trade Fleury, they couldn't find anybody who wanted him, and they realized, we're stuck. We got to spin this now.
Well, that's for sure what happened, because they tried to trade him, no doubt about it, and then what they said was, I think they wanted to make it sort of a Mark Stahl type of deal. Yeah, we'll give you a second, you take Fleury. And people were saying, not if you want us to take half the salary, then it's going to cost you more. And they didn't like that. And then by the time they revisited that, everybody, the music had stopped, and Marc-Andre Fleury didn't have a chair. So, that was a difficult situation. But, these things blow over. And, I've said a long time ago that 2 goalies is too many, and sometimes 5 isn't enough. It just depends on the what's going on. So we think it looks silly that they're going to have $13 million in goalies this year, but if Leonard doesn't play well, or if he gets a long-term injury, then it'll look like they're geniuses. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But as usual, this is the fastest 30 minutes in all of sports. Feels like 10, and we're at 31, so we're going to have to go. So we appreciate you listening. We'll be back on Thursday, and we'll talk more about the odds probably of the Stanley Cup, some of the other teams, where they're at. So make sure you join us.
All right, folks. This has been the HockeyDebates.com podcast powered by Sports Betting Dime, and we'll be back with you, as Kevin said, on Thursday.